Hello, my name is Erin Park, and this is my final presentation for CS 358 Parallel Computing at Northwestern University. My topic is about parallelizing the process of denoising microscopy images. We're going to start with going over parallelism as a concept, move on to what denoising is, and how it pertains to microscopy images and how its algorithms can be parallelized. And then I'll go over an example of a programming language that's specifically optimized for image processing. Since this is a fairly technical topic with a lot of terms that you may not know yet, I'm going to go over some basic terms first. We'll begin with the concept of parallel computing. I make a lot of pasta, so we'll use that as an analogy. Let's say that for my pasta dish, I have 3 steps to make it. I have to prepare the ingredients, I have to boil the pasta, and I have to make the sauce for it. So I could make everything one step at a time. So I get all the ingredients ready, which we can say is 10 minutes. And then I boil the pasta, which is another 15 minutes. And I make the sauce, which is another 15 minutes for a total of 40. But that's a little bit inefficient, and it's not like I only have one pan. I can do some of these things at the same time, but it requires more thinking and scheduling of my resources. So I could start boiling the pasta and making the sauce at the same time, and I could grate cheese and chop ingredients in between stirring and keeping track of what's cooking, and I move between tasks to make sure nothing burns. So instead of taking 40 minutes, I could be done in about 15, which is the time of the longest task, not all the times of the tasks added together. This is essentially what parallel computing does. Instead of doing everything one by one, tasks are done in parallel at the same time, as long as they're managed carefully. Some problems can't be parallelized at all. For example, if instead of my pasta dish, if I were making Kraft mac and cheese from a box, it's a sequential task where you have to boil the water first, and then cook the pasta, and then drain it, and only then you can mix in the sauce, right? So you can't skip ahead or do the steps out of order. So even if you had multiple people waiting to do each task, it would take the same amount of time because it's a sequential task. So it's important to know beforehand whether a task can be parallelized, otherwise you might waste time and effort. There's a term for tasks that are particularly easy to parallelize called embarrassingly parallel, which means that it's kind of obvious how they can be broken down into groups of tasks. So some classic examples are password cracking with a list, ray tracing in video games, and, most relevantly, neural networks on a GPU. Speaking of neural networks, they're a type of machine learning algorithm which are inspired by the human brain. They're made up of layers of neurons, and each layer builds upon the previous layer's knowledge. So there's 2 main ways that they can be parallelized, which are model parallelism and data parallelism. Model parallelism is done when there's a very large model, and one model can be distributed on many different processes. So each one is getting a portion of that model. And data parallelism is done when there's a very large amount of data. So there's replicas of these models on each part of this data. So both of these things can be utilized for neural networks, especially in image processing, because there's a large amount of data and there might be a very complex or large model. And so now I'm going to move on to what image denoising is. So here's a noisy image of my family's dog on the left. So you see these grainy patterns that are corrupting the image. So those patterns that are kind of interfering would be noise. There's many kinds of noise, but all reduce the image quality. And denoising is the process of getting the clean version, like the one on the right, from the noisy image, like the one on the left. There's various supervised and unsupervised algorithms for denoising, but the vast majority are based upon neural networks. So if you look at this, so supervised neural networks take a pair of labeled data, so one noisy image and one clean image of the same one, and then it learns to differentiate which part of that is the noise. And then unsupervised will just take noisy pairs of the same image and then there's a variety of processes that go on to figure out what the noise is in the image. This is especially important in scientific imagery, like in the field of electron microscopy. So, electron microscopes produce noisy images, and the noise involved is inconsistent but not random. It's kind of hard to get a perfect ground truth image, and since the noise isn't completely random, it's a bit difficult to train on it because there's other factors involved. So, there's a specific sort of microscope that I'm going to go over here, which are SEM microscopes, scanning electron microscopes. And these images are often used in the field of semiconductor manufacturing and the life sciences. And these images often have a complex structure, and they have this non-random, non-Gaussian noise that are affected by factors like dwell time, microscope settings, etc. So the noise itself is uncertain, and there's often issues with the algorithms overshooting and having information loss. Most importantly, these algorithms tend to take a very long time. So if you look at this table from an aggregate model of an aggregate paper of denoising algorithms, you can see that some of the time here takes like 2-4 days. So it's very time consuming, and you might be training the same model many times to see if certain variations work or like certain approaches are working. So parallelization is pretty important to speed this up. So that brings me to the topic of the paper that I read for this, which is Quasar, which is a high-level parallel array-based programming language by the Ghent University, which is in Europe, image processing research group, which aims to reduce the barrier entry to optimizing image processing problems, such as denoising in this case. So essentially, since to parallelize code, you need to know systems or GPUs, maybe a variety of mathematics, and not everyone can be an expert in those fields as well as the field that they're doing their actual research in. And often the people that are doing these image processing are in the life sciences, which is even further from CS, so like that's a bit of a barrier to entry. So this is something that was created to remove that as much as possible and make it easy so people don't have to know C++ or like CUDA or everything else. So essentially what this does is it takes the code, and it's like kind of like a MATLAB level, high level code language, and it compiles it to C++ with CUDA, OpenCL, or like just OpenMP. So there's like these 3 options that you can do for it. And because of that, you get like a good enough interpretation of the code that's optimized, and you don't actually need to get into the weeds. It also has like a variety of different optimizations for the specific domain of image processing, such as loop interchanging. It's actually based upon parallel arrays in the first place, which is similar to some of the assignments that we did with the images. So, yeah. And here's some examples of the performance of it compared to OpenACC, which is another framework, and CUDA. And I guess CUDA is the more important one here. So if you can see, it has good performance for like the majority of these problems, which are some code fragments that are frequently used for computer vision tasks. There were also like complete computer vision programs, but they didn't do as well as these fragments due to the difficulty importing it. So if you look here, the its best performance is especially with memory coalescing, partial sequence loop, and radon transform multi-GPU. So the important part is that it mostly holds up to the performance of CUDA without having to actually do CUDA. So it might not be absolutely perfect, but if it's good enough, it's good enough for researchers. So lastly, here are the sources. The third one in particular is the paper on CUDA. And thank you for listening to this presentation.